I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. You know, when you're a young girl and you see your first brides magazine, or you go to your cousin's wedding or something like that, and you start to fantasize about what your wedding is going to be like. Growing up Mormon, I knew that Heavenly Father wanted me to grow up and get married and become a trad wife. And really, like, the silver lining of that was someday I get to have a wedding. But what I didn't realize was that growing up Mormon meant that my wedding was going to suck. So today I'm going to share with you the top 10 things that I hated the most about my Mormon wedding. If you're new here, I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two, where I share my escape from the Mormon cult. If you're not already, please give me a sub. I have some really great stuff coming up in the next few weeks that you're not going to want to miss, including some special guests. And please keep your stories, questions, and feedback coming. Hanging out in my comment sections is my favorite part of everything that I do here. I was born into a big Mormon family in 1974. And of course, growing up, I knew I was going to get married, so I had in my head what I wanted my wedding to be. Now, for those of you who aren't Mormon, I think it's really important to point out that Mormons don't talk about the temple outside of the temple. What happens in there stays in there. And my parents and grandparents were literally under a blood oath that they wouldn't ever talk about anything that happened inside the temple anywhere. I remember as a young girl growing up, once opening my mom's top drawer, like her undies drawer, and pulling out her temple robe and apron and stuff that was mixed in there with her garment. And my mom literally weeping tears and going, "Oh, Jenny, where did you get my temple clothes?" And immediately hiding them like we were both going to be cursed because I had seen something that mortal eyes are not supposed to see. So it is top secret and undercover. I did have some temple prep classes, both in college and in my single adult ward before my temple wedding. But the temple prep classes were super generic. They were like, inside the temple, we make covenants to Heavenly Father, and we receive the fullness of the gospel. There was no nitty-gritty. There were absolutely zero specifics. And I got married in the temple in 1995 before Google was invented. So there was absolutely no way for me to have known what my wedding was actually going to look like. To say that I was disappointed in my wedding is an understatement. Literally filming this video today, almost 30 years later, my hands have been shaking and I feel this knot in my stomach and just pure, unfiltered anger that I was robbed of that little bit of a ray of sunshine that my wedding should have been in the cloudy storm of a Mormon life. So I'm still disappointed. I feel like there needs to be some bittersweet Broadway musical, not the Book of Mormon, but something more dark, where it's all of the Mormon trad wives, it's a hard knock life for us living in the Mormon cult. If somebody wants to write that for me, I am happy to get behind it. Yada, yada, yada. Little Mormon Jenny turns 20 and I am engaged, and I call the temple and I schedule my Mormon wedding, not having any idea what I was getting into. They did tell me, we need you to come on 2 different days. So they gave me the times. We need you to be here Thursday for several hours and then Friday for several hours. So then you can plan the after party, your wedding reception, as early as noon. They gave me instructions to take my temple recommend that my bishop and stake president had just signed for me and go to the Mormon Church Distribution Center and buy myself the temple clothes and some outfits. And they gave me instructions about my wedding dress, and then that was it. That's all I knew. Here's what I knew. I was a 20-year-old girl and I had scheduled a wedding. And then I showed up at the Mormon Temple for 2 days and I got a wedding. Still depressed. So here are the top 10 things that I hated the most about my Mormon temple wedding. Number 10, the outfits. I think that's the one thing that was consistent throughout my whole entire childhood. Picturing my wedding was, what dress am I going to wear? And getting married in 1995, of course, it was all about the puff sleeves and the bedazzled bodice and the big long train. And I was not allowed to have any of that inside the Mormon temple. They were very specific. I couldn't have any beads. I couldn't have any lace. I couldn't have anything like that on my wedding dress, or I wouldn't actually be able to wear it for the wedding. It had to be totally simple, totally stripped down, and then it had to be painfully modest. Even though the garments only come up to like here on me, my wedding dress had to be to my collarbone, and it had to be long sleeved and go all the way to my wrist, and of course all the way to the floor, which most wedding dresses are. And it couldn't be too form-fitting, so it could be fitted but not too fitted. And they told me that if I showed up at the temple the day of my wedding and my dress in any way didn't fit the criteria, that I would not be allowed to wear it, and I would instead have to wear one of these like white polyester bathrobes that you rent from the little laundry there in the temple for like $2. That would be my dress. I had my Mormon mom, who has all of her Mormon mom ninja skills, sew me kind of Grace Kelly knockoff out of raw silk. And it was modest enough that I was able to wear it inside the temple. So I was really excited about that. I got to keep my wedding dress on for my wedding. Imagine that. But what I didn't realize is that I would also then be covered in the Mormon Temple other stuff. These are the Mormon Temple clothes. You have the crazy ass polyester veil. You have this green apron that's supposed to symbolize Adam and Eve making themselves fig leaves in the garden, and this weird polyester sash, and the robe that goes across you. All of that was strapped over the top of my wedding dress for my wedding, so that you really couldn't see anything but the sleeves. I was painfully self-conscious and just felt ugly and weird. Not like the beautiful princess that you feel like you want to look like on your wedding day. And this was all sprung on me in the bride's room. So the morning of the actual temple sealing, the matrons, and I think my mother-in-law was there that day, they come into the bride's room with my temple clothes that we had bought at the distribution center. And they're like, okay, now this goes over the top for the wedding. And I was just absolutely speechless. I'm standing there, buttoning up my dress, looking in the mirror, thinking, wow, I look so pretty. And now I have to be clad in all of that. And I hated it. Number 9, the weird-ass handshake that I had to do with Jake over the temple altar. You know, I had been to some weddings by the time I got married, and I've seen weddings on TV and stuff like that. And the couples are always like holding hands and like looking into each other's eyes, and it's so beautiful. Well, we didn't get that. We were kneeling on opposite sides of one of these Mormon temple altars, which in a way, like, I liked that. That's not on my list at all. The altar seemed kind of like sacred, and I don't know, it seemed very Mormon-y to me. But instead of just like holding hands, Jake and I got married while clasping each other's hands in what's called the sure sign of the cross, representing the nails that were driven through Jesus's hand in his palm, and also the secondary nail that the Mormon temple says was driven through his wrist to secure his body to the cross so that it didn't just like plop off the cross. And that was the very romantic hand gesture that Jake and I got to embrace each other in over the Mormon altar. Number 8 thing that I hated the most about my Mormon temple wedding was the undies. And I don't even know why I feel like crying on this one. I think it's because my whole entire life as a Mormon, I was robbed of ever feeling sexy, womanly, desirable. And then I leave the Mormon church at age 44, and now I'm just like this chubby grandma, so I don't look good in lingerie, so whatever. But Bridal magazines always have those like really beautiful lingerie sets for your wedding, like the white lace corset and the beautiful bra with all the pearls on it, and you know, this sexy little like what do you call those, the garters and those white stockings. I have a really sad story to go with this one. I had actually bought myself one of those Victoria's Secret wedding lingerie sets when I was engaged to my first fiance. I had sent him a picture of me just holding it up to kind of like motivate him to keep going with his mission. And I was so excited to wear this under my wedding dress. I knew that I was eventually going to have to wear Mormon garments, but somehow in my head, I thought that maybe you got those like at the end of your wedding, or you could put them on afterwards. I didn't realize that I would be clothed in those at my wedding. But nope, the day before my wedding, I was clothed in the garment of the holy priesthood. This is them. That was my underwear for 24 years, and I was commanded not to take it off, to keep it on night and day, which meant that instead of my new husband taking off that wedding dress to like sexy little me underneath, he peeled off that wedding dress to find my Mormon pilgrim panties. And I felt so self-conscious and so unsexy on my wedding night. Not that it mattered, because Jake was a jerk anyway, but it was really sad. Number 7, the length of the Mormon Temple wedding is absolutely unprecedented. You picture, you go to a wedding and it's maybe like half an hour with the bride walking down the aisle and all the music and they say their vows and then they go out and maybe there's an after party. But the Mormon Temple wedding is 2 solid days or like 4 hours in one day because I had to start with my washings and anointings and then go through my whole entire 2-hour endowment. That was day 1. Then the next day was our sealing, and it took me a long time to like get dressed and ready in the bridal room. And then they gave us some instructions before the sealing and waiting for everybody to get there and get situated. It was this huge, long process. Then I had an after party. So I was absolutely exhausted. I was actually snoring in the hotel room within like 10 minutes of getting there. It's not even like a good type of long where you're really engaged and excited to be there. It's just long and boring and culty and horrible. Number 6, so the price. It seems like Mormon weddings are super cheap because that temple is free, right? No. Getting into the temple meant that I had to pay 10% of my income for my entire life. I started paying Mormon tithing when I was a 3-year-old girl. That's the first time that I became a sunbeam in the youth ministry that the Mormons call the primary. And every fast Sunday, we would have a little box that we could put money in tithing and money in fast offerings, and they'd play this little song. So I started paying tithing to the Mormon church in early childhood. When I was a waitress at the Olive Garden, when I had a sales job, everything that I did, all my babysitting money, I always gave 10 cents on every dollar to the Mormon church. Not only that, but think about all my great-grandparents and their kids and my grandparents and my parents who had tithed to the Mormon church. Basically, like my Mormon Temple wedding cost hundreds of thousands of dollars because of all of the tithing that my family had to pay to raise me as a good Mormon girl and make sure that I was worthy of my temple recommend. Number 5, I got a naked rub down in the temple. I'm going to link a video in the description of my TikTok video of this event. This was so traumatizing that I was still talking to a therapist about it just 4 years ago, which is why I did that original TikTok video. Instead of just like having me dress in like normal clothes, I was told to strip naked and put on this robe that was open on the sides. And then I was led into a little room where there was a seated altar. I know everybody argues with me. All of the Mormons are like, no, it was a chair or you were standing or it was a bar stool. I got married in the Portland, Oregon Temple. The Portland, Oregon Temple, the Mesa, Arizona Temple, and several others have initiatory altars. It's not like the normal altar that you get married at, but it's like this marble thing with a little velvet cushion on the top and then a little marble footstool for your feet. And I sat there while first one woman and then another woman entered the room and touched my naked body without my consent from head to toe with oil and then water. And during the process, this wasn't actually part of the ceremony. This wasn't supposed to happen. But I had double D breasts, and one of the women, while she was going from my collarbone and my breast down to my stomach area, accidentally fingernailed my nipple. I can talk about this now kind of jokingly. I do separate videos just on this topic. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. I had just kind of come off of my period, so I wanted to have my panties and a pad. I was being told to put on this white thing and I was just freaking out, like I'm going to bleed on this white thing. And when they took me into this room and just leave me there sitting on this altar with just this little sheet over me and naked underneath, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like what I imagined might be about to happen to me was actually much worse than what actually did happen. But what did happen was invasive, intrusive, and it left me feeling violated. It left me feeling confused, and that initiatory, that naked rub down, stuck with me the whole rest of that first day and then throughout my wedding. Like I was just in shell shock over what I had gone through in the temple. The Mormon Church has since eliminated the way that they do this because guess what? It's illegal. It's considered non-consensual sexual touch, and you can't do it. But it happened to me, so they used to do it. The number 4 worst thing about my Mormon Temple wedding was the part of the endowment where I had to raise my hand, bow my head, and take an oath to be unalived for the Mormon Church. In the moment when that happened, as part of the endowment ceremony, when I literally had to say, I will give my time, my talents, everything that I have been given, even my own life, if it be necessary, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I still remember that feeling that I had of, this is so wrong. Like, my human survival instinct, it's what's kept us alive as a species. It's why we're still here. And that's an important instinct that nobody should ever be asked to override. A 20-year-old girl should never be asked to pledge to override her own survival instinct by promising to give her life to a church. I remember standing there in that endowment room surrounded by all of these people and having my hand in the air, and it was time for me to bow my head and say yes. And thinking to myself, like really grappling with that, like, I want to stay alive. I don't ever want to be unalive for any reason. And am I willing to truly give up my own life for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And eventually I just kind of calmed myself down and was like, I have to trust in Heavenly Father. I have to trust in the church. So yes, I'm willing to give my life for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that was prior to the sealing. So all of these things just left me completely shaken going into my sealing. Death oaths are so romantic. Speaking of death, the number 3 thing I hated the most about my Mormon Temple wedding was reenacting death and the resurrection. At the end of the endowment, prior to our sealing, there's this huge white curtain in the temples, and Jake was standing on one side of the curtain with like these little holes and like his arms reached out of it. And then I was standing on the other side of the curtain, and we reenacted death. Like, I had died, and then I go up to the veil, like the veil you pass through to go into heaven. And I said all of the signs and tokens to Jake. And then he like grabbed my hand and pulled me through the veil into heaven. So literally as part of my wedding, we reenacted dying and going to heaven. Joseph Smith, he was some weird-ass freak. That's literally all I have to say about that. Number 2, this is another one where I might cry, and my family loved ones were not there. Again, you picture your whole life getting married and everybody being there to celebrate with you, but the only people who can go inside the Mormon temple are people who are worthy and endowed and old enough to go inside the Mormon temple. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and none of my brothers and sisters were old enough that they could even go inside the temple. My mom and dad, I do other videos on this, hadn't paid tithing for a couple of years. And so my dad was denied a temple recommend. And in 1995, if my dad didn't get a temple recommend, then my mom also couldn't. Even though she was a stay-at-home mom and didn't make any money of her own, they were both worthy. They were just non-tithe payers. So the only people inside that room with me and Jake when we got married were my new mother-in-law that I was just meeting for the first time, my grandparents, my favorite uncle, who's also my least favorite uncle currently, my mom's baby brother, and like my old seminary teacher, a couple of witnesses, one of my young women's leaders. Everybody that mattered to me was standing outside of the temple. Everybody that mattered to me was not in that room with me. After our whole entire wedding was over, and we went out the front doors of the temple, my parents were just sitting there on this little marble bench, like in the parking lot, waiting for their first daughter to come out after her wedding. For a church that says that it's all about family, the Mormon Church has spent my whole entire life tearing apart my family. And that leads us to the number 1 thing that I hated the most about my Mormon Temple wedding, and that was being forced to marry a total stranger I had known for a month and a half, because he had touched my boob under my bikini while my fiance was on his Mormon mission. Definitely the worst part of my Mormon Temple wedding. And you guys, within just a couple of weeks, Jake would begin to be very abusive with me. And I would go to my grandma and tell her I need to get a divorce, but I couldn't, because I had just taken that oath across the altar in the Mormon Temple to be married to Jake for time and all eternity. And in 1995, I could not have that canceled. If I had divorced Jake legally, I would have still been sealed to him in Mormonville. And because of that, no other Mormon man could have married me in the temple for time and all of eternity. So when I told my stake president in the very beginning about escalating violence and how miserably unhappy I was told, well, at least you have a husband. And if you divorce Jake, no return missionary, no good guy, no Mormon man is ever going to want to marry somebody that they can't take to the temple and be sealed to for time and all of eternity. So this Mormon Temple wedding kept me stuck with a monster for 24 years. Since I don't want this video to seem too dark, I do want to just end this on a happy note, because after 24 years, clearly I escaped domestic violence. I'm life take two for a reason, because I have built a whole new life on the other side. In October of 2018, I would suddenly, in the middle of church, lose my faith in the Mormon church. I would walk out with Jake and my children that day. 2 weeks later, my 24-year marriage would come to an end, in part because I no longer believed in my Mormon temple sealing. So that allowed me, that last time that my husband picked up an escort, to say, out you go. And I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the temple sealing anymore. So it's over. And 2018, it's been 6 years now. I have rebuilt a somewhat fragile and not always easy life, but a very happy life on the other side. I did fall in love, and I have a beautiful partner. We've been together for almost 6 years. We'll celebrate 6 years in May. Kevin and I met just 10 months after my marriage ended. That seems really quick, and it is. If I could go back, I may not have gotten into a serious relationship so quickly, but I had also been separated for 3 years, and I had dated quite a lot by the time Kevin came along. I feel like I need to have Kevin on with me to do a video about our commitment ceremony. We decided not to get legally married, but also he's Christian, so he wanted to take those vows in front of the pastor. So we had a commitment ceremony / wedding, and it was during the pandemic, so there were only a few people in the church with us. We wrote our own vows, and we Zoomed it to everybody else, and it was really beautiful, really intimate, really meaningful. As part of our vows, there was no weird handshakes. I got to wear a cute little $21 Target dress, and I made my own flower bouquet from stuff from Trader Joe's. And our vows don't promise till death do us part. In our vows, we promised to be kind and beautiful to one another and to treat each other with love, no matter where our relationship goes in life. And loyalty, fidelity, monogamy, of course, all of those things. It was beautiful. I was happy. I do feel like I got robbed a little bit because none of my family got to be there, but also we don't have any money, so we didn't have to spend money on a wedding. And I think it is important to point out that my mom was not on the Zoom wedding. All she had to do was click on a link. Because I left the Mormon church, she no longer wants to have anything to do with me, and has not now for almost 7 years. So she didn't even want to be there watching her daughter get married to the love of her life. And she also prevented my dad from being part of the ceremony. So wait, that's another sad note. But it was happy. It was beautiful, and Kevin and I are happy, and life is so good on the other side of religion. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be hanging out in the comments, and I will have time this week to do a couple of follow-up videos to any questions that people have. So if you have any of those deep dives, then throw them at me.